So the work in road trip kind of corresponds to three phases of my life, and the three areas that I focus on are the high desert of the Colorado Plateau, right around here, where I was raised, and Alaska. That's perfect, thank you. Where I spent or misspent a lot of my years as a young adult. And then finally in Washington State, where I now live and have raised family and kind of found another home. So all three places kind of feel like home to me. So I want to briefly visit all three in this reading. I'll be reading short excerpts from a couple different essays. So the theme here is sacred places, places that have made a lasting impression on me, who I've become and what I value. So by way of introduction, I'm going to talk about outhouses. So this is the beginning of a piece called Sacred Places, which I thought was kind of a pretentious and lousy title, kind of, I don't know. Everybody does that. So the way in is through the little door. It may seem a strange way to begin an essay about sacred places, but let me tell you that in all my years, I have never encountered so splendid a latrine as the one on the edge of the Sulphide Glacier, just over the rock pile from High Camp on the way to the summit of Mount Shuckson in the North Cascades of Washington State. First, let me acknowledge the competition, for there are many inspiring latrines in the world. I'm speaking, of course, of places designated for the purpose rather than those chosen out of desperate necessity. For instance, there's an outhouse, sans door, just a short stroll from the West Rim Trail in Zion National Park, where one may sit and contemplate the drastically blue high desert sky while a red-tailed hawk wheels lazily overhead above an expanse of cream and burnt orange sandstone temples. And then there's another doorless outhouse, just a stone's throw from a cabin I used to live in, a few miles outside of Fairbanks, Alaska. It was best in winter, when its contents were frozen solid. Granted, it was hard to get out of bed when the temperature was 30 below zero, but once committed to the styrofoam seat, one was free to appreciate the crystals of frost that laced the bare limbs of birch and willow, twinkling in milky blue moonlight. The view looked out on typical subarctic bog, where spindly black spruce leaned drunkenly in all directions, like trees in a Dr. Seuss story. Once in a while, an aurora would weave overhead, emerald curtains rippling, spears piercing the night, violet patches of excited, magnetized stratosphere skittering like skipped stones across the black pool of the sky. But the winner, hands down, is the open-air latrine on the edge of Sulphide Glacier. Once, in early morning, I sat there, doing my business, and watched car-sized bergs of ice on the crystal glacier slide from their tenuous perch, trundle down into the basin of Sulphide Lake 1,000 feet below. The sound of the ice giving way echoed like the report of a gunshot, then dissembled into a deep rumble, finally ending in a puff of spindrift that belied the tremendous power of the avalanche. I couldn't see all the way into the basin below, but I imagined the carnage. On many occasions in the mountains, I've seen the trunks of enormous fir trees splintered by the power of snow as casually as the drinker of a martini might splinter a toothpick. It took a while for the crackling sounds to completely thin out to silence. I was alone, as one usually prefers to be in such circumstances. I don't know if I said anything. Maybe I said, "Holy shit." What consecrates a sacred place? What makes it holy? And why, you may wonder, do I start my essay with outhouses? Why do I blend the undignified with the sublime? My answer is that I don't blend them. They come to us already blended. The spirit and the body are inextricably bound to one another. So why wouldn't it be fitting for a latrine to occupy sacred space? That's part of a larger essay that's really about a dog. I haven't even got to the dog yet, but the idea there is that The dog was kind of sacred. He was a companion that just appeared out of nowhere in the woods and followed me for 4 days. And God, dog spelled backwards is God and sacred. And, so there you go. This next excerpt brings us back down here to this part of the country and a place that I spent many a happy weekend as a teenager, the Grand Canyon. In 1981, I played trombone. Oh, there's something else I should say. This is part of an essay. It's about places, but it's also about an idea. And I'm a pretty competitive person. I like sports, and I hate coming in second place. And I come in second place sometimes a lot. So the essay is about, the point of the game is the name of the essay. So what is the point of the game? And, you don't always win. So that's a key concept in here. In 1981, I played trombone in the jazz band at Anchorage Community College in Alaska. It was in this group that I met Mike, a kid with flaming red hair, an adventurous spirit, a thirst for spiritual experiences, and a true gift for jazz trombone. I, on the other hand, put my heart and soul into it, but I probably wasn't an asset to the ensemble. I sat second chair, but sometimes there is a lot of difference between first and second chair. My tone was kind of asthmatic and pinched, whereas Mike's was bold and full and golden like a sunset. I often felt inadequate when I realized the gap between Mike's talents and mine. However, I loved the music. And when it was my turn to take a solo, the feelings of inferiority and the need to compare myself to Mike evaporated in the sheer joy of improvisation. I don't know how it sounded to him or to an audience, but it sounded good in my head. Mike, God bless him, was gracious enough never to disabuse me of this notion. We became friends. Sometimes we'd head out to sea stacks along Turnagain Arm, where we scrambled up the shattered rock, watched the boar tides come rushing in while we drank Guinness, ate brown goat cheese, and talked about Buddhism and Christianity. We chased a moose, bad idea, panned for gold at his family's claim, and listened to recordings of Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and J.J. Johnson for hours on end. While we hiked through the Alaska wilderness, I shared with him my love of the desert. In particular, I spoke of an unnamed little spring in the Grand Canyon nestled at the base of the Redwall limestone below Horseshoe Mesa. Seen from above, it was a tiny, blessed little burst of vegetation where the water emerged from the ground into a thin thread of vibrant green as it snaked its way down through the jumbled vermilion rock to vanish as abruptly as it began. Water in the desert, all the more precious because of its fleeting nature. It was, I said, a sacred spot to me. I described the deep alcoves of limestone and how echoes would come back in waves. I moved back to Arizona, and I didn't hear from Mike for a couple of years. One March night, he called out of the blue and said he was in Utah on his way to Flagstaff. He had one goal, to play his trombone at that spring, if I would take him there. So on a cold, windy March day, we headed for the canyon. We trudged and slipped down muddy switchbacks with Mike's trombone until we found a place where the Redwall limestone hemmed us in. Mike began with scales and arpeggios, which vaulted from cliff to cliff until it seemed like there was a chorus of hidden trombonists perched on ledges throughout the canyon. We took turns playing the horn. We played Brahms, hymns, jazz standards, alternating soaring golden tones with delightfully fat and brassy-edged low notes. The music swirled through the alcoves and spilled over ridges until it seemed to come from the sky itself. As we were hiking out, we encountered a backpacker who laughed when he saw the trombone case. The celestial music, as he described it, had kind of spooked him. He wondered if it might be Judgment Day. Since that time, the canyon has become more crowded, even in its wild sections, and I'd hesitate to do what we did again. The opportunity for silence and solitude is one of the best gifts of nature, and maybe our music had been a crude invasion of someone's peace, but I can't say I regret it. It didn't matter that Mike was a better trombonist than me. What mattered was that our peculiar decision to lug that horn down to Horseshoe Mesa, something that probably could have earned us a ticket or at least a lecture from a ranger, unfolded into an extraordinary moment in which the creativity of human beings dovetailed exquisitely with the glories of nature. It's not hokey, I hope, to attach the word praise to what happened. And wherever praise is present, ego blows away in the wind. All right. Another canyon piece. I'm in Arizona, so I'm going to celebrate Arizona. And my wonderful daughter, Jordan, came all the way from Atlanta to be here with me. So I'm going to read a piece that she'll remember because she was there. And one of my favorite places on God's good earth is West Clear Creek. I love West Clear Creek Canyon. And this is a bit about a little trip we had there. There are several trails into West Clear Creek, but the most interesting descent is through one of the slot canyons that come in from the south. These canyons start as shallow draws in the pine forest and then abruptly slice into the Coconino sandstone, forming slots with sudden drop-offs and deep keeper potholes. I've come to Bear Canyon with my daughter Jordan and her boyfriend. They are from Seattle, and I want to show them the country where I grew up. As we scramble down into the slot, the hot, dusty air of July is replaced by the cool dampness of a canyon that has year-round pools never warmed by the sun. A single shaft of sunlight slips through a keyhole gap and illuminates the ledge from which our first rappel takes us. Dust motes twirl in the sunbeam as I set up the anchor, and down we go. A slot canyon is a world of curves. Rappelling into one sees neither the top of the canyon nor the bottom, only bowls, scoops, hollows, grooves, waves, and ridges, an infinity of perfect curves swirling in all directions at once. These curves bring joy to the fingers and to the eyes. In Bear Canyon, the creamy Coconino sandstone is cool, gritty, pleasing to touch. Nestled into the stone are delicate moss gardens, a testament to the seeping moisture that finds its way from the porous soil above through the jointing in the rock layers. In some places I can feel both walls at the same time, tracing each parallel ridge and groove carved into the stone by raging floods. The curve, my grandfather told me when I was about 10 years old. I should mention my grandfather was an old Dutch Calvinist curmudgeon. The curve is the most perfect of God's ideas. That's why woman is the jewel of creation. And snake, a backwards curve, is an abomination. Then he told me to go outside and play. And so, puzzling over his incomprehensible parables, I explored the woods behind his house, and I saw curves everywhere. The path of a heron's flight, a spider web, a slithering snake, an infinity of curves playing with each other, penetrating each other, intertwined. I wondered which curves were backward and sinister and which followed God's plan. How could I tell them apart? What was I supposed to see? My grandfather was a large, deep-voiced man with a King James vocabulary and the bearing of an Old Testament prophet. I remember that he put applesauce on everything he ate, as if this too was part of God's ordained plan. Before meals, he offered endless, rambling prayers in which he managed to work in the most obscure stories from the Bible and thanked God for things like the veins in a sassafras leaf. What did he mean with his story of the perfect curve? Maybe my grandfather meant that spirits inhabit everything. Maybe he meant that the world was seductive and dangerous at the same time. Maybe he was telling me to be careful. Then again, maybe it was just a joke. After all, the man put applesauce on pork chops. Whatever his intent, the result was that I understood the physical and spiritual realms to be intertwined in ways that could lead to pleasure and trouble. Every turn in a slot canyon leads to a surprise. A delightful fern garden, a patch of poison ivy. Maybe a row of perfectly formed bathtub potholes, or a pocket of quicksand. Maybe the carcass of an elk that fell into a pool and couldn't get out, and now you have to swim through rotten elk stew. You're at the mercy of these curves. You go where they lead, be they forward or backward. Exploring a slot without a rope, or with a rope that's too short, is an exercise in anxiety or faith, however you choose to see it. But today there is no anxiety. Bear Canyon is fairly mild as slots go, only 3 rappels. Still, each of these rappels is directly into deep pools, and there are freezing swims through inky black water. It's adventurous enough for today. After a while, the slot opens up, and it's boulder hopping on the water-polished stones. Along the main creek, dappled light dances through maples and reeds. Puffy cumulus clouds skitter across the high country sky, so blue you could swim in it. It must be that some of the curves of Bear Canyon are backward, or we would have just traveled in a circle. But I can't help but think that all of these curves of this day, both those of woman and those of the snake, came together in perfect harmony and symmetry to shape this canyon that is the exact shape of my notion of paradise. Anyway, one more piece, and it's pretty short, and it takes us back up to Alaska. But before I do, I want to thank everybody involved in making this happen. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Anne, for reading together with me. I love your work so much, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you. And I want to thank Jesse and Jay for making this series happen and for letting an old homeboy come back to town so many years later. We didn't have anything like this when I went to NAU. There was no MFA program. There were no reading series. Jim Zimmerman had just arrived in town and started teaching people like me how to write, and it's great to see this literary culture that has come to be here. I'm really happy about it. All right, this is the last piece is from a long essay called What Is Not Seen. And the concept here is that the things that are most threatening and maybe most inspiring and most mysterious in nature are often things we can't even see, and they're kind of lurking beneath the surface. So as I go through the essay, I talk first about a fish. It's the proverbial giant fish that got away and that I didn't quite see. And the second part is about a bear that I didn't quite see, but I knew it was kind of following me and knew where I was, and that was spooky. The third is about mosquitoes, which I couldn't see, and I felt like they were threatening my life. And so this is the last part of that essay, and it's about the last thing that I couldn't see. When I first came to Alaska, when I was young and stupid, when my ambition exceeded my caution, when my confidence outweighed my experience, and when I took it for granted that my cup of luck was refilled every morning, I climbed a mountain. It was a minor peak, probably unnamed, really just a bump along a corniced ridge, but it looked out over a glorious valley. Y'all know what a cornice is? The snow that forms over a steep ridge, and the wind blows it, and it ends up kind of being like the crest of a wave that goes over the edge. It was late afternoon on an April day. On my way up the mountain, limbs of willow and alder were sheathed in tiny blades of frost, catching and splintering the cold brilliance of the early spring sun. Nearing the crest of the ridge, I was awed by the layering of light, salmon-tinged clouds above golden, rocky outcrops, above the milky blue snow down in the shadowed valley. I wanted to look down into that valley, so I slowly light-footed it towards the edge of the ridge. The snow upon which I walked was crunchy, firm, and elegantly furrowed by nearly constant wind. At least, it felt firm. Born and raised in the desert, I was new to the mountains of the north. I didn't fully appreciate the danger of cornices. I didn't understand that under the crusty top layer of snow, there's a layer about as consolidated as styrofoam packing peanuts. And that under that, there was another thin crust, and under that, nothing but air. Before I knew what was happening, the crust gave way like a trap door. My stomach lurched into my throat. Quicker than thought, adrenaline flooded my body, and I splayed my arms. Sometimes there are signs when these things are about to happen, but I didn't yet know how to read them. I was not attuned to the language of snow, the muffled whump that precedes a separating slab, or the delicate shift that precedes a sudden snap over a twinkling of loose, sugary crystals. There are some physical sensations a person doesn't forget. One such sensation is to have your body punch through a surface that you thought was solid and to feel your legs swing freely in a space you can't see. It's a sensation I don't care to repeat, but I confess that the recollection of it is enough to remind me how much I love my life and wish it to continue. Why did the snow give way at precisely that spot? Why did the shelf of snow remain strong enough under my elbows to allow me to crawl out? I'm not sure that why is a useful question. At any rate, because I'm one lucky dumb shit is a possible answer. Some people resort to words like grace, karma, prayer, fate, luck to address these questions. Some impute motives to unseen beings or see every molecule of the seen and unseen world as infused with intentional spirits. Others could explain to me the physical properties of snow and how variables such as body weight and time of day affect the ever-changing structure and plasticity of snow crystals. Either way, the snow in its glory seems indifferent to my fate and unburdened by responsibility. It, along with that fish, that bear, the storm, that mosquito, needs only to be what it is, interconnected to all other animate and inanimate parts of the world in ways we can only partially understand and predict and often cannot see. We live and die, we eat and sometimes are eaten, and we are often pardoned, irrespective of merit. I never looked into the abyss. I mantled my way back onto that hard snow, praying it would hold my weight, then scrambled down the windward slope on my hands and knees without even seeing the hole that had nearly ushered me into the next life. "No, thank you," I whispered under my breath to the snow. It didn't answer, but continued to shine even more brightly than before in the rays of the setting sun, which is, I suppose, a kind of answer. Thank you very much.